Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today I would like to introduce you to the new version of the all-in-one binding ruler. Now, this binding ruler has all of the great features of the larger one. However, it's just a shorter version, so it makes it easier to put around the sewing machine, store, and travel with. Let me show you all of the great features and why this really is the all-in-one binding ruler. The Sewtacular All-in-one binding ruler is designed for 3 widths of binding. Our standard 2.5, 2.25, or even a nice little 2-inch binding. So we have measurements on each side to do that. We also have an angle with a little cut off on, and that's going to trim all of our strips so that they're at that perfect 45-degree angle and it cuts off the dog ears. We have a little notch in the corner, and that's going to be an area where we can draw so we get to those points when we're stitching on the binding. So with this ruler, there's no measuring involved. All of the markings will do it for you. So we need to start with well-pressed fabric, and I do have my fabric so the selvages are touching. I have a cut and a fold. Now, in order for us not to have to cut a long distance, we are going to be able to take that ruler and use it with the fabric folded. So we're going to match up that straight cut edge, put the selvage and the fold together, just smooth it out, make sure it's nice and flat, and now we're going to be able to cut. You're going to be able to cut left-handed or right-handed. The measurements are going to work both ways. If you're going to cut a 2.5-inch binding, you're going to use the entire width of that ruler, match up the edge, cut, move, and cut as many strips as you want. If you're going to do a 2.25, you're just going to go to that second mark. If you want a 2-inch, same thing. We just need to match it up to the 2-inch line. It doesn't matter what side of the ruler we use or what side on the fabric we need. As for myself, I do like 2.25-inch bindings. So I do have it on the 2.25-inch cut. I'm going to be able to move one strip and continue cutting. Once all of our strips are cut, we're going to be able to cut a diagonal so that we can sew those together. And as we're using the ruler, we just need to have all of the writing face up so that we can read it. So we're going to be able to open up these strips. And I do like to put a couple of strips together at the same time, and I have all of the right sides of the fabric facing up. I can place that edge of that ruler that has that 45-degree angle and that little notch cut out. I'm going to place that top edge along the top of the binding. I like to cut that little point off first, and then my angle. So I have that 45-degree angle on the one side. I'm just going to take the other side of the strips, match them up, put that top of the ruler right along the top of the edge, cut off that little dog ear, and then the angle. So we have that little square dog ear cut off and that nice 45-degree angle. Regardless if you're doing a 2, 2.5, or even a 2, you are always going to use the top of the ruler, match that up, and trim. These angles are now going to fit together. We're just going to match up those 45-degree angles, and that little cutoff point is going to run along the one edge and is going to match up to the other. Now stitch a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Once those are stitched together, we're going to be able to press, and I would recommend pressing the seams flat. And then just press so the insides are touching and the raw edges are touching. So we're going to sew the binding on and start sewing approximately 8 inches. We're still using a 1/4-inch seam allowance and the raw edges are matched up. Continue stitching down until we come to about 3 inches. And then we're going to smooth everything out, and that ruler will fit along the one straight edge and that second edge. This area we are just going to draw a line. This is going to be the line that we're going to stitch to this point and then stitch off. Pivot and stitch right off that corner. Take the binding out. This edge is going to go right along that edge right there. So this will just get tucked in. So we have the fold along that one edge, the cut edge right along the cut edge. I now can turn this and stitch down. We're still using a 1/4 inch, and you're going to stitch right over that fold. And continue stitching until we get approximately 3 inches from that next corner. And we're going to go all the way around doing all 4 corners with this point. So continue stitching till you get about 8 inches from your starting piece and remove the quilt. So we have the beginning, and this is the piece we are ending with. Take the ruler and match the edge with your cut edge. So this cut edge is going to go along the edge of the ruler. Take the top binding, open it up, and smooth it where it should be stitched along the quilt. In the ruler, there is a ditch. This ditch is designed for a pen or a pencil line. So we're going to have that ruler lined up, smooth this top binding right over top, and in that ditch, you are going to be able to draw a line. And you're drawing that line right over top of that binding. That line is a cutting line. So we're just going to cut right along that line. That will now match up to the bottom piece. So we're going to be able to just match those up and stitch them right at the machine with a 1/4 inch seam. Will give us that perfect angle. So when we open it up, those edges meet. Just finger press that seam open. Now, when we lay that down, that binding is going to fit perfect. We can now turn that over, bring that binding over to do our hand stitching or machine stitching. We can also use this ruler to cut a bias binding. I would recommend 1 layer of fabric, and a fat quarter really does make it easy. We're going to cut a 45-degree angle. So we already have an angle right here for us. But we're going to use that little wedge line. Place that wedge line right along the edge of the fabric. Now cut that first little triangle off. We now have that perfect 45-degree angle. I like to take my fabric and fold it in half so this edge is matching. So we're going to bring that up and match that edge. We now are going to be able to cut our strips just like before. And in this case, I'm going to cut it the 2.5 inches. And it won't matter what side of the ruler you use. And you could do this on the left or right side. So the edge of the ruler is going along that edge, which was where we cut that off. Now we can cut our strips. Just move that ruler just so it matches up along that edge and cut. When we get to the part where this is no longer long enough, we just need to fold that fabric one more time, keeping these edges together. And continue cutting. All of these strips now are at the 45-degree cut, and we'll have a little triangle in the corner. Place all of your fabrics together right side up, just as before. Some of those pieces are already going to be cut at the right angle, but I would still recommend just to clean them up. I can now take the second side and match up those pieces. Some pieces will be at one angle, some will be at the other. All of the strips need to be cut to that correct angle, and that way they're going to be able to match up, and we're going to be able to sew the binding just as we did before. And that 1 fat quarter is going to give us approximately 118 inches of bias binding, which is just a little bit more than 3 yards. The quilt is ready to have that binding rolled back and stitched down. Now you can stitch it by machine or you can stitch it by hand. And of course you can always do that binding on the bias. The ruler makes it simple. It has all of those great elements that we need to get that perfect binding. And there's no measuring. I do hope you like the ruler. I'll put some links in the description. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Bye for now.